One manifestation, and we'll be going through a number of them in the course of this program, of the imminent and potentially very fraught danger is what the Xi Jinping regime in China, the Chinese Communist Party he leads, has in mind for the nation, and I use that term deliberately, of Taiwan. And a man who has just returned from there and who has spent many years both in connection with Taiwan and in connection with the state of affairs in his native China, is, I'm pleased to say, with us. His name is Lianchao. He was a student activist in his youth back in the 70s in, among other places, Hunan. He helped champion the idea that there should be free elections in China. Needless to say, this did not endear him to the regime of the day, nor has it in the years since. It has, however, endeared him to all of us who hope for the Chinese people that they too will enjoy the freedom that unfortunately many of us take for granted, but that we know must now be defended against the Chinese Communist Party. Lianchao, will you join us and tell us a little bit about the CCPs, Chinese Communist Party's threat to Taiwan, among other freedom issues?
Good afternoon. My name is Lianchao. I work at Citizen Power Initiative for China, and I just got back from Taiwan, which is a great trip, very impressive. But I also saw the China's threat firsthand. I saw there are many experts, true experts on Taiwan here. And I'm just want to express my view about what I see the major threat in Taiwan. I hope the experts will join us to discuss the issue. Tomorrow is going to mark the 40th anniversary of Taiwan Relations Act. And of course, this TRA has helped to mitigate the negative impact of Carter administration abandoning Taiwan. However, it may not be reflect today's geopolitical situation in East Asia, nor provide adequate protection for Taiwan. I will discuss that later in my talk. So it needs a complete review and update. This is critical because the CHINCOM's threat to Taiwan is imminent. And because Taiwan's very survival and Taiwan people's life are on the line. From Nixon administration to Obama administration, the US had made so many mistakes in regard of Taiwan. The biggest mistake, I think, is walk right into the CCP's trap, one China trap. I think that's the biggest mistake. The CHINCOM's goal, the Chinese Communist CCP's goal on Taiwan is to seize and occupy the island at all costs. Since Xi Jinping took power, the regime has been intensifying all front assaults on Taiwan, against Taiwan. Xi Jinping believes take over Taiwan is his historic mission, a part of his China dream, and a great national rejuvenation. 40 years ago, when US and China re-established normalized so-called diplomatic relationship, and the Chinese regime made a Taiwan statement, which shifting its policy from so-called liberation to peaceful unification. But the matter of fact is, nothing much really changed. The CCP has been aiming to subdue Taiwan without fighting. But it also created so many narratives, such as the Chinese don't fight against Chinese, people across the street are the same family, and the shared destiny of the people across the street. But it has never stopped preparing for using military force to seize and occupy Taiwan. They have a grand strategy, and they're following the playbook step by step to make sure Taiwan become part of China. I'm going to talk about four areas that how China's threat becomes so damaging, so imminent. One is on political side, then second, the military side, the third, economic side, and then diplomacy. So on the political side, Chinese regime knows better that the fortress is the easiest to break from within. So what they do in the political side is they launch political warfare against the political system. And they create, basically it's the division and conquer strategy. They create divisions among the parties, political parties, I mean KMT and the DPP. And also they create divisions within the parties to cause them, to make them collapse. You can see clearly from the beginning, very beginning, this is almost 30 years back, almost 40 years back. They've been doing this, the political warfare, political influence for many, many decades. And KMT in the end is totally collapsed and corrupted by the Chinese government. The tools they use, the most effective tools they use is to funnel financial, economic benefits, interests into KMT elites. Many KMT's children, retired generals, and government officials open China, make tons of money. In the process, they become pro-Chinese communist regime. If you look at today, they're celebrating, commemorate Chiang Kai-shek's 44th anniversary of his death. And during the ceremony, nobody talked about anti-communism. Anti-communism was a core for Chiang Kai-shek. Nobody talked about that anymore. The premier of Taiwan, Huo Guochun, defense minister, he was compared Xi Jinping as Sun Yat-sen, as the founding father of ROC. And also he also praised One Belt, One Road as Xi Jinping salvation or helping the poor of the world. So this type of situation, you can see that KMT completely corrupt. And now the next step, next target is the DPP. They create divisions among DPP. And they also use projects, big projects, to help DPP elites get money and divide them, conquer them. This is happening right now. And then at the same time, they create their own political parties. They have about a few dozens of pro-Chinese regime organizations, political parties. One is they call it White Wolf. His political party promotes reunification. Another one is Association for Patriotic Alliance. They both are very confrontational, violent, openly advocate communist ideas and use violence, use verb abuse to make a noise. A friend of mine who supported Taiwan independence gave a talk in Taiwan a few years back. He was beaten by those political party members. So this type of political corruption is everywhere. You can see they have a truck, they have a Chinese red flag, they have the propaganda trucks driving around Taipei now. And the situation, I think, it's almost unbelievable. I want to talk about military harassment, military coercion. China never failed to prepare for military action against Taiwan. If you look at how much money they spend on military, they built aircraft carriers. They have these missiles, 1,200 to 2,000 target on Taiwan. They have submarines 59 compared to Taiwan's 2 operational submarines, and have 5 nuclear submarines. It's almost impossible for Taiwan to catch up. But under TRA, the US is supposed to provide adequate defense technology, materials, arms cells. But that technology, that arms cells never catch up with China's rapid military modernization. So, and then on the economic side, China creates economic dependency for Taiwan. You look at Taiwan's export, most Taiwan's export went to China, 40%. And Taiwanese businessmen, there are about 2 million businessmen working in mainland China. They're all become part of agents, part of Chinese United Front work to promote unification. And you have to work with them, support the agenda to be able to make money. They use that as a leverage against and lure them and to promote their own agenda. And that creates the economic independence of Taiwan. Without break away from that, even Tsai Ing-wen has this southbound policy. I think without US help, it may not work effectively. Lastly, I think diplomacy. Taiwan is the best country. If we have to vote for a model member of the global village, Taiwan would be the top on our selection. But Chinese government use all this leverage to force to so-called shave Taiwan's head. Basically, the one 0 countries has diplomatic relations with Taiwan. The reason is they want to no country recognize Taiwan's sovereignty, so they can invade Taiwan. Right now, Taiwan has only 17 countries that has a diplomatic relationship. And before, in the 70s, was 70 countries, and it dropped to 17. China, on the other hand, during the 1970s, had about 50. Now it's 170. I think these mistakes, the reason is, I think, what's behind the reason, they want to squeeze the international space of Taiwan, so when they invade Taiwan, nobody come to Taiwan's help, because legally they can see that's part of China. So, okay, thank you.
It's extremely painful to foreshorten that really important presentation, but thank you for getting through it despite my efforts to do that, nonetheless. This is a few minutes for discussion. Rick is one of our members at the Committee on the Present Danger of China. He's also one of America's leading experts on the Chinese military. And he has been warning now for some time that, as Lianchao has just said, the capabilities that the Chinese have been inexorably building are increasingly sufficient to accomplish this conquest. Would you take 2 minutes, Rick?
Certainly, Frank, and thank you for this micro forum. 15 years ago, in conferences full of private sector and other sector participants, the common joke was any Chinese invasion of Taiwan would constitute a 1,000,000-man swim. It was a way of laughing it off, essentially. Today, it is my estimation that using roughly 2,000 Boeing and Airbus airliners alone, if PLA airborne forces were able to take control of the major large airfields of Taiwan, that airliners alone could put about 5 million soldiers and other support troops in Taiwan within a month. The PLA is also noted quite often for not having a large formal amphibious assault capability, LPDs, LHDs, and the such. This will come. By the 2030s, there will be amphibious assault fleets that will be roaming the world. But for now, you occasionally pick up articles in the Chinese web about the mobilization of the Yangtze River Basin. Back in about 2006, 2007, Chinese Ministry of Transportation officials worked with the United Nations and provided us a count. The Chinese have about 50,000 barges that ply the Chinese rivers. We saw the Chinese use maybe 100 or 200 of those barges to build all those new bases in the South China Sea about 4 or 5 years ago. If there was going to be an invasion of Taiwan, in addition to the airliners, the PLA could mobilize multiple waves of at least 10,000 barges each to transport its forces, armor, whatnot, to Taiwan. So the threat to Taiwan is real and real, very real today. Instead of dithering about whether we sell Taiwan 66 F-16s or maybe a few F-35s, we need to be selling Taiwan the capability to manufacture 20 or 30,000 cheap medium-range cruise missiles to take out those invasion fleets. That kind of capability will keep Xi Jinping on his side of the strait.
Rick, thank you very much. Bill Kurtz from the Washington Free Beacon and Washington Times, one of the country's premier investigative reporters, national security journalists, and authors of several books on this very subject.
Thanks, Frank. My comment is to, I think, really to look at how Taiwan fits within Chinese strategic deception. And I think that one of the areas where the committee could really focus would be on a review of intelligence failures related to China. And I think Taiwan plays large in that spectrum. As someone who's covered China and written about China for more than 30 years, I can tell you that year after year, our intelligence agencies put forth the incorrect notion that China's ambitions for its military and its economics and its political, its military power essentially, was only directed at developing a force that could retake Taiwan. There were voices within the government that opposed this, including Mike Pillsbury, and yet year after year, the annual military power report from the Pentagon would always have this conciliatory language that China's really doesn't have global ambitions, but only wants a military that will take over Taiwan. Now we know that this has been totally false, and it's just one of the many failures that has been the result of strategic deception on the part of Beijing. There are other failures as well in terms of monitoring their buildup, but I think it would be really valuable for the committee to focus some of its resources and efforts to looking at the intelligence failures related to China.
Good, thank you. This is very much appreciated because we are, as Brian Kennedy said earlier, very much in the process of mapping out the next steps and the most effective way we can contribute. So I appreciate that especially. Mark Stokes, the executive director of the Project 2049 Institute, another member of the Committee on the Present Danger China and foremost expert on what China has in mind for all of us by 2049, if not considerably before. Mark.
Thank you, Frank. Sometimes I can barely think to this afternoon, much less 2049. But thank you very much.
But they do.
Yes, sir. They do indeed. I would like just to make a quick add a couple comments to Han Lianchao's absolutely magnificent comments here, as well as Bill and Rick here. To me, the objective reality is that Taiwan, under its existing Republic of China Constitution, exists as an independent sovereign state. Its existence is different than the way that we deal with it. It's a policy issue. But I would note that just in that first, Hao Guosun is not really KMT per se. I think he left the party in the early 1990s. But generally within the KMT, there's different factions, I would say, or different fundamental beliefs. But since the Ma administration, their view of one China, there's one China. Taiwan is part of China, but that China is ROC, and that ROC consists of the Republic of China consists of two areas: Taiwan area and mainland area. So what they're implicitly saying, and I agree they probably wouldn't admit this or even highlight this point, but what they seem to be saying is that the legitimate, if there is one China, which includes both sides of the Taiwan Strait, then that legitimate government is the ROC. It's actually a democracy. So just want to make that point. Sort of, it's implicit, but something we should keep in mind. Secondly, about 5 years ago or so, an analyst named Peter Mattis published an interesting piece in the National Interest that called upon the public and analysts to think carefully about a possible scenario, maybe unlikely, but possible scenario, and that's a catastrophic collapse of central order in the People's Republic of China, where the Communist Party loses control. If you think of these terms in terms of what would be U.S. policies and how we would respond to this, and you think through the potential role of Taiwan, or the ROC, whatever term you want to use, you sort of place Taiwan in a much more significant light and potential role in being a partner for the United States in this unlikely but very possible scenario. Thank you.
Mark, thank you very much. Morgan, if you could bring the microphone over here to Sasha Kaun. Sasha is another member of the Committee on the Present Danger. She formerly directed the Mandarin service, the China service for the Voice of America. She was imprisoned in China for her opposition to the regime in her misspent youth, and we're delighted that she's here to bear witness to what we're facing, and specifically, if you could comment on how this Chinese operation, the influence elements of it, and information operations are playing out vis-a-vis Taiwan.
Yeah, actually, when you think of it, if you go to Shanghai, you see Taiwanese people everywhere. And once I interviewed a Chinese official, and he told me about 10% of Taiwan's vote is in Shanghai. So when you think of it, well,
Say that again, 10% of what?
10% of Taiwan's vote. When Taiwan is democracy, but the vote is in China. And well, that was 10 years ago, and at this point, I think perhaps 15%, and I don't have the number. So what happened is that when you go to the Taiwanese community, you all know the Chinese have injected enormous influence in all the Taiwanese communities in order to influence the Taiwanese vote, and especially also in the United States. And so something I think we need to pay attention to, how the Chinese operate in the Taiwanese community, in China and here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is really an important point that Chinese diaspora, I think we'll wind up hearing more about in the course of the day. I'm very pleased to have another of our distinguished members of the committee, Bob Fu. Dr. Pastor Bob Fu is another Chinese student activist who has made his way to our country, become a citizen. He now runs China Aid and is a man who has also recently been in Taiwan. Bob, we're very pleased to have you with us.
Thank you, Frank. Just a quick point really about what Lianchao talked about, the China's kind of penetrating impact in the Taiwan society. I mean, it's really, they're adopting a very same playbook as they have been doing dealing with the Western free societies, that they are using their so-called soft power, not hard or soft power, basically financial propaganda to take advantage of the free society, all the freedoms. And we're in Taiwan just with Lianchao, and you see the CCP's flag. I mean, the Communist Party's flag. It's not only the PRC's flag. The CCP's flag was being being transported and being broadcast. I mean, in a mobile, in a vehicle around the Taipei street, broadcasting the propaganda. How much, Taiwanese or Chinese who hold a flag of the Republic of China would be arrested, would be immediately thrown into prison. And one project I want to, maybe the committee, somehow we can focus on is to study how much media independence in Taiwan society right now. If you turn on TV in Taiwan, of course, we still cherish this 23 million people democracy. But if you watch on the Taiwanese the TV station or newspaper, read the newspaper editorials, how much percentage left, Mark, right? Not much, but they're extremely one-sided. When the election, like midterm election in Taiwan happened, one DPP candidate posted of her platform on Facebook, immediately, like over 3 million kind of cyber kind of hits anonymously, and almost taken down her Facebook just for promoting independence or freedom of Taiwan. So that might be a worth project. We can do a research and see, the money trail that who are funding this Taiwan's media. Maybe 90% already belong to the Confucius Institute, kind of the same funding source, the propaganda department of the Communist Party. So I want to raise that issue.
Well, thank you both for that comment on China. Let me turn to our two presenters so far, Brian Kennedy and Lianchao, to wrap up this discussion.
Well, thank you, Frank. I guess my question would be for Lianchao, actually. Why should Americans care about Taiwan? I worry that this is the 40th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act, that many Americans, especially those who, all the young people who grew up long after the end of the Cold War, they don't appreciate what these things really mean. Maybe you could just say something about that. Why should Americans care?
I think that's a great question. Thank you. The reason I mentioned before, we need to update TRA and Taiwan policy, U.S. Taiwan policy. The reason is that all this Taiwan policy formulated before Taiwan became a democracy, a real democracy. So in the late 70s, early 80s. Even the sixth assurance by President Reagan, that's still before Taiwan became democracy. Taiwan right now is a beacon of democracy in Asia, and recognize universal value, recognize the American value, and be a very loyal partner of the United States. If we don't defend Taiwan, I think that will mark the decline of America as a free country, as a democracy, as the leader in the free world. I think it's critical for the United States to make sure we come to Taiwan's help, because the fundamental geopolitical situation has changed, and we no longer need China to balance Soviet Union, and Taiwan become a democracy. And that changed everything. And if we don't support Taiwan, I think right now the only thing that stopped China to invade Taiwan is the United States. They were not sure, they are still not sure whether US will interfere or not. But in the TRA, it's one-sided, unilateral imposed obligation. It's not treaty obligation. So China will always test the water, how far United States can tolerate, what cost United States would bear to defend Taiwan. We need to make that clear. Otherwise, a new president come to power, to the White House, he may have a different view about national interests. So we need a clear review of TRA and update to reflecting the current situation of Taiwan. Thank you.
Well, and I think as has been said, but it's worth repeating, the Trump administration has done more with respect to living up to the spirit as well as the letter of the TRA than any president, I think, since it was enacted. The trouble is, ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear. If we don't deter China, this will be a horrible loss for the free world in general, not just Taiwan, because it will absolutely, positively confirm China's confidence, Xi Jinping's China dream, that it will secure the dominant position in the world, and it will be harder and harder and harder to stop, to say nothing of the horrific losses that will be entailed, probably, most especially for the people of Taiwan, but quite possibly for a lot of American servicemen and women who might be sent into harm's way to try to prevent that outcome. Gentlemen, we thank you very much for your contribution to this part of the program.